Whoa. On Salt Spring Island. And they're all Chinese military. Wow. I wonder what it is. Huh. Crazy.
Here's a story that I wonder if you've heard before. Chinese troops in Canada doing drills. What is going on here? There's a book out called The Mosaic Effect, how the Chinese Communist Party started a war in America's backyard, the authors of which are joining us now, Ina Mitchell and Scott McGregor. Good morning. Thank you for your time and being on with us today.
Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Joe.
Praise be to God. So there are some crazy videos of what looks like Chinese troops in uniform in Canada. Tell us the story.
Well, Joe, this is a real mystery that's right up there with the James Bond plot. It started about 2 years ago when the RCMP held a press conference and to announce the murder of a Chinese national named Bo Fan. Bo Fan had only been in Canada for probably about a year, and she joined what China calls a cult, or has branded a cult called Create Abundance. And the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, simply didn't know much about them. And we're actually asking the public to help them, fill them in on who is this group. We have a very large Chinese diaspora here, and I think they were probably hoping to get some more information. Now, at the same time, coincidentally, Scott and I, my partner, were informed by one of our sources that there was this really odd video on YouTube. It had maybe 30 hits, not a lot of hits. And it was what looked like an army running down this remote part of an actually remote island. So it was the corner tip of a remote island. Now, this island is called Salt Spring Island. It's about 2 hours from Vancouver, and it's only accessible by boat or seaplane. So on this island, the remotest part of the island is where this fella who took the video actually saw what looked like a Chinese army troop running down the street. And he filmed it. His name is Banana Joe. He's a local tropical plant aficionado, and he just happened to have his camera that day. He was going out looking for plants to take pictures of. And so he posted that, and it sat there for a long time, and people just didn't know what to think about it. And we had talked with him, and he had told us that people just thought it was a conspiracy theory, never thought much about it. Now, Scott and I came across it, we looked at it, and we realized that after having talked with Banana Joe, that the same place that this troop was running to, where they were staying on the island, was in fact the same cult that Bo Fan was attached to. 2 different locations, 2 or 3 hours apart, one only accessible by boat and seaplane, and the other one right beside the U.S. border.
Wow, that's a crazy story. Again, we're talking with Ina Mitchell, Scott McGregor. The book is called Mosaic Effect, how the Chinese Communist Party started a war in America's backyard. Let me ask you questions for clarity. You said Vancouver, so we're talking the Pacific Northwest here.
Yes, yes. We're 2 hours from Seattle, up from Seattle, right beside the ocean, right beside the Peace Arch border crossing.
Now, Scott, I know that you served in intelligence in the Canadian military, so you've got a background here. The only time I heard about this story is when I watched your interview on Joshua Phillips Crossroads. This surprises me from your background, Scott. Wouldn't this be a red flag to at least the Americans? Are the Canadians okay with this?
So the Canadians aren't okay with it. There's certainly a lot of questions being asked. I know that what's been revealed through media has opened some people's eyes to what's potentially going on. It's difficult to say. I know you mentioned the word troops, and that I think that's the initial reaction, was that people had thought that the Chinese, their People's Liberation Army, were acting on Canadian soil. Now, we can't prove or disprove that. The fact is that those troops that we saw, or the people that we saw, and are identified as belonging to this cult, and were conducting like a boot camp style training on this island, were wearing Chinese People's Liberation Army uniforms. And those aren't something that you just pick up at the general store here, a surplus store or something like that. These have insignia on them. They're pretty rare. It'd be something you'd have to have, brought in. And there was a lot, like hundreds of these people. So it's not and there was different uniforms. Through our research, we found that they had different forms of their camouflage. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more going on than meets the eye. Our aim was to create awareness, and bring to attention that this kind of activity was happening. So those were some of the bigger concerns that we wanted to raise and hopefully draw more attention to.
So I'm wondering, what were the cult members doing on this island? Is there any evidence of what they were up to? Were they just training? Or are they just having a good time up there? What did you find out in your investigation?
So, some of the things that we found out that were very significant is that they were conducting training of different types. They were conducting firearms training, which in Canada is well restricted. You have to go through a special licensing program to be able to fire firearms and own firearms and that kind of thing. And through our research, we identified many cult members that had gone and gotten their licensing and were practicing firearms. There was an elite portion of this cult that conducted the military style training. There was connections to what is a known organized crime figure in the Asian community, who was training them in hand-to-hand combat. So they were attending this person's gymnasium, gym with all of its capabilities. And yeah, that was a bit concerning when we started to piece some of these things together, because in Vancouver, we've identified that we have, the state, the party, and organized crime working together. Through my time with the RCMP's Federal Serious Organized Crime, through the military, some of my training, and I also worked for the Attorney General's office. And we had a lot of money laundering and that kind of thing going on in our gaming industry, which started a public inquiry. We find that all of these things have been working together, and they've been working with some other nations as well. So this is where we start to speak about hybrid warfare and, the sharp power, the soft power, transnational organized crime, threat finance. Those things are all extremely saturated in this region. It's of significant importance to the U.S. While I was working with the RCMP, I brought in a bunch of intelligence analysts and some senior intelligence officials from the Five Eyes community, from Australia, the United States, Great Britain, and New Zealand. And I held think tanks on a military base where we discussed the hybrid warfare that was occurring here. And that was eye-opening for a lot of these countries. They didn't quite realize how significant it was. But when they went back and started doing their own collection on using classified means, et cetera, a lot of these things were validated, which, initiated more interest in the Vancouver region, so the Lower Mainland, they call it the LMD, and how it can impact everyone else. So it's very significant. The Five Eyes intelligence community is aware. The government's aware. I briefed them personally. So,
let's go back to you for a second here. This group, you used the word cult, so maybe you can help us with clarity here. Who exactly is this group, and who's claiming they're a cult? Is it the communist government? Who's claiming that they're a cult?
Well, that's an interesting question, because when we looked into them, they have several names. They came here in 2014. And, if you go online, and it's hard to believe everything, when you go and you look at state media and you read some of what they say about the cult, it's very hard to tell how much of it is planted there or how much of it is genuine. But the suggestion was that they were kind of pushed out of China, and that they chose to come to Canada. And that was around 2014. So, China doesn't, as you know, take to religion too much, and they're an atheist nation. And so that was sort of the backstory they were trying to sell. Now, we're not so sure we believe that. I think that we think it's probably more a case of them being sent here. It was around 2014 and when they came here, and it was around that time that the leadership kind of changed, and two individuals joined the organization in the leadership capacity, and they had definite ties to the CCP.
Wow.
And at the same time, back in China, and think about this for a moment, they're fleeing. That's their story. They're fleeing religious persecution, but yet at the same time, they set up a foundation in their name and start to work with the Chinese government and collecting money to give to various charitable causes. So it really doesn't make sense, that on one hand, they're saying that they're refugees fleeing, they're brandished as a cult, but on the other hand, they're also working with the Chinese government with this foundation, charitable foundation. So it doesn't really make much sense. A number of the cult leaders were allegedly put in jail, and yet we would find, at the time that they were supposed to be in jail, we would find evidence of these same people being in Paris at a fashion show. So things weren't really quite lining up.
Now, we only have about a couple of minutes left in our conversation with Scott McGregor, Ina Mitchell, and their book, The Mosaic Effect, How the Chinese Communist Party Started a War in America's Backyard. Here's a question. So did they come and go? I mean, going back to those military uniforms for a second, again, you can't find that stuff just any old where. So are these people still on that island, or have they just come and gone? 2 minutes left on the clock. Scott?
Well, really quickly, there was some things that happened with the resort. In fact, it burned down.
Wow.
And, so
the mystery
whether
deepens.
That was by design or not is a good question. But certainly, if you had information or anything that was in that location, it's no longer there.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe that it's still here. It's still operating, likely a little more underground than it was before. It was very overt. These big, huge worship meetings that they would have at fancy halls and that kind of thing. These were people from all over the world that were coming to these. 100 people flew in from all over the world to receive this training. And it's kind of curious. It looked a lot like they were trained to be spies. The younger generation, which people try to push off. A lot of people try to discredit this and think that it's, Cub Scouts or paintball team or something like that, and it is not. I'll tell you right now, it is very serious.
Last question really quick, because we're running out of time. Is the American government aware of this? Ina?
I think that's a question for Scott, actually.
Well, we have just seconds on the clock.
Yes, they are aware.
Okay, good. Praise God. All right, we are out of time. We may have to have you back to follow up. Ina Mitchell, Scott McGregor. The book is called The Mosaic Effect, How the Chinese Communist Party Started a War in America's Backyard. Thank you both for your time today. God bless you, God love you, and have a great day. All right, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Breaking news coming up next.